The world around us consists of millions of species, the biodiversity which sustains life on this planet that we share.
The human race is constantly affecting the world as knowledge of it improves and technology advances.
At one time in the past, the human impact on the Earth seemed positive to humans. However, the exact nature of this impact threatened the future of the planet's ecosystems.
We have one person to thank to trigger the start of the environmentalist movement, which protected the Earth from this catastrophe.
This is the story of Rachel Carson and the fight against DDT pesticide
By Birkenfeld
and Isabella Shawe. On the 27th of May, 1907, Rachel Louise Carson was born in the town of Springdale, Pennsylvania.
In her childhood, Carson developed a love for nature and wildlife on the Pennsylvania farm that she was raised on.
Rachel Carson also had a talent for writing, and later on attended the Pennsylvania College for Women, where she intended to major in English, but eventually changed her major to biology.
She received her bachelor's degree in 1929, then held a study fellowship at Woods Hole Marine Biological Laboratory, and completed her master's degree in zoology at Johns Hopkins University in 1932.
In 1936, Carson received a position as an aquatic biologist with the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, and soon became the editor-in-chief of publications.
Carson often wrote pamphlets and articles about nature conservation and other scientific articles, and in 1941, Carson adapted her ideas into her first book, Under the Sea Wind, receiving high praise and leading her to resign from her part-time job to become a full-time writer.
Becoming a full-time writer allowed Carson to write and publish multiple books, such as The Sea Around Us in 1951, which won a National Book Award, and The Edge of the Sea in 1955, gaining her fame and reputation as a credible environmentalist.
As Carson continued to influence others to conserve the environment, she developed an interest in the effects of pesticides, including DDT pesticide.
Dichlorodiphenotrichloroethane, commonly known as DDT, was developed as an insecticide in 1939 by Swiss chemist Paul Mueller.
DDT was widely used by farmers, public health workers, and foresters in agricultural areas.
DDT targeted the nervous systems of pests, causing them to succumb to convulsions and paralysis whenever they came in contact with DDT.
DDT was highly effective in preventing illnesses spread by insects, such as malaria, typhus, and yellow fever. DDT also protected agricultural plants from destructive crop-eating insects.
By 1945, DDT became the most used pesticide in the entire world and became available for commercial use.
Reasons for the rise of DDT include the World War II propaganda used around this time.
In 1945, World War II came to its end with a victory for the Allied forces. Propaganda claimed that if the Allies can win the war, then they could also win the war against insects and insect-carried diseases.
By 1953, the United States alone used over 79 million pounds of DDT annually.
Despite all the positive uses of DDT, environmentalists, including Rachel Carson, were noticing many negative effects of the pesticide. Though DDT is only intended to target disease-carrying bugs, the pests are eventually eaten by the consumers on the next level of the food chain, which are eaten by the consumers on the next level of the food chain, and so on, causing the DDT concentration in each organism to exponentially increase as it escalates up the food chain. The same process commonly occurs with DDT-sprayed plants and DDT-exposed bodies of water. This process of DDT making its way up the food chain is called biomagnification, which poses a risk to humans considering that the highest level of consumers, humans, receive the highest concentration of DDT in the food that they eat. A reason why DDT magnifies is that the chemical DDT is highly soluble in lipids. This means that once DDT enters the systems of organisms, it mixes with the fats in the organisms, and in result has a higher tendency to stay there.
Because of biomagnification and the overuse of DDT, humans have been affected with multiple cancers, nervous system and liver damage, infertility and miscarriages, and low birth weight. DDT also was discovered to cause eggshell thinning in multiple bird species, and is even blamed for the near extirpation of the peregrine falcon and the decline of the bald eagle population in the U.S. Non-targeted insect species that are necessary in their ecosystem were also harmed by DDT.
Rachel Carson was one of the first to realize the dangers of DDT. She wrote down her findings and promptly submitted an article to Reader's Digest. Her article was rejected, causing Carson to give up on the idea.
In 1958, Carson regained her interest in DDT after hearing of multiple bird deaths due to DDT sprayings. Carson then submitted more articles, which were rejected despite the fact that she was a best-selling author at that time, meaning that her ideas were extremely controversial and unorthodox compared to the views of the general public. Carson then decided to write down her findings in a book instead.
4 years later, Carson finished her book about the dangers of DDT, called Silent Spring. The book both scientifically and lyrically expressed the negative impact DDT has on the environment through biomagnification, harming untargeted species, and how DDT remains in exposed areas for many years.
When the book was published in 1962, the readers across America immediately became paranoid. Many denied Carson's claims, thinking that her science was incorrect and that even she was losing her sanity. The chemical industries who manufactured DDT were outraged and claimed that Carson was incorrect.
Despite all the negative reactions towards it, Silent Spring immediately became a bestseller. It also began to alter the perspectives of readers on DDT. Soon enough, the chemical industry was faced with consumer complaints about the dangers of DDT.
Many other works of media, such as the CBS Reports TV special, The Silent Spring of Rachel Carson, began reporting on the controversial book.
The children born today are exposed to these chemicals from birth, perhaps even before birth. Now, what is going to happen to them in adult life as a result of that exposure? We simply don't know.
Following this documentary, President John F. Kennedy's scientific advisory was ordered to examine the issues brought up by Silent Spring. In 1963, Carson testified about the dangers from the misuse of DDT and other chemicals in a U.S. Senate congressional session.
The success of Silent Spring, backed up by the support of the academic community, turned the public's point of view to that of Rachel Carson, earning her even more popularity and a reputation as a leader of environmentalism.
Rachel Carson, unfortunately, had little time to enjoy her success with Silent Spring. On April 14, 1964, 2 years after the publication of Silent Spring, Rachel Carson succumbed to her long fight against breast cancer. Throughout the next few years following Rachel Carson's death, the world became more concerned with the state of their environment and the negative impact humans sometimes have on it.
The New World environmental awareness inspired by Rachel Carson's bold actions to stand up to DDT helped to establish the Environmental Protection Agency on December 2, 1970. Congressional hearings then took place on the topic of DDT, and in 1972, the EPA officially banned the use of DDT in the United States. The ban of DDT potentially saved multiple ecosystems from destruction and put severe biomagnification to a stop.
Despite all the positive effects from Rachel Carson's influential life, there still remains critics of Silent Spring and the science behind it, with some who claim that more lives could have been saved from disease by DDT than lives lost to the negative environmental effects of DDT. However, other science predicts that the continuation of DDT would have been disastrous, with exponential growth of damage to each exposed ecosystem as time continues to pass.
Rachel Carson's impact on the world has not only prevented mass environmental destruction from DDT, but was the first influence to start the modern worldwide environmental movement, still active in the present day. Rachel Carson's legacy is now immortalized in many organizations and monuments dedicated to her that continue to promote healthy human interactions with the environment. Carson's hometown, Springdale, Pennsylvania, known as Rachel Carson Homestead, became a National Register of Historic Places site to memorialize the famous scientist and writer.
Rachel Carson will continue to be celebrated as a heroic conservationist who greatly impacted and protected the world and ensured the furtherance of the environmental movement that is practiced everywhere in the modern world.
I truly believe that we in this generation must come to terms with nature. And I think we're challenged, as mankind has never been challenged before, to prove our maturity and our mastery, not of nature, but of ourselves.